Okay, so I want to talk about emotion today, and I want to talk about it at the fairly general level of how to work with it. So we're going to go through all the stages one could go through with working with emotion. Now, in basic mindfulness, the way we work with it would just to sit down and go, what's happening right now in my body and in my mind, and practice acceptance and clarity of seeing with the emotional experience you're having, and that will work. That's going to be challenging at times. That's going to be you're going to have to learn things about what's hiding from you and what you're not seeing and how you're looking, but that is the general instruction, and it still applies. But we're going to go now into the different ways that kind of acceptance could be practiced, and the different stages of really working through an emotion and healing an emotion. Now, some emotions are short. Ideally, all emotions would be like this, but these days, some emotions are short-lived responses to an external event that you feel fully and then you're done with, and you never have to see them again. That's ideally what we're trying to generate, the kind of experience we're trying to generate for all of our emotions ultimately. But most of our emotions, or a lot of the emotions we end up working with in our life, things that we find challenging, things that we find in meditation that seem stuck, or things that become repetitious in our life, we find them happening over and over again. These things need to be worked with well, at the level where they are, which means that they're not just flowing fully through our body in response to the present moment. So I haven't written this up, but maybe I will in the future, but we'll go through I'll go through a series of ways of being with an emotion. So the first one is the way we normally are with an emotion. Our normal emotional experience is to be the emotional experience, to believe that we are the emotional experience. So we identify with the emotional experience. It's me who is angry, or it's me who is scared. Part of identifying with an emotional experience is that we believe the beliefs of the emotion. So the emotion has a point of view on the world. And when the way we normally interact with our emotions is we believe that point of view of the world. And this makes a lot of sense, because emotions are there for a reason, evolutionarily and psychologically. They're there to motivate us to take certain actions. So it's important that we believe their point of view, so we act the way the emotions want us to act. And that's fine. If we're out in the jungle and a lion comes out and we're scared and we run, great. The emotion did its job and everything's great. But civilization has sort of uses our emotions in a different way and gets us believing all sorts of things that are not actually, well, true. So the way we normally are with an emotion is we are the emotion, we believe we are the emotion, and we believe the beliefs of the emotion. And so when we are, this is the first stage, we'll call this the first stage, stage number one. When we are in this relationship with emotion, the solution to the emotion is to behave, is to do what the emotion wants us to do, or that is to change the external world in some way. I mean, sometimes we have emotions about ourselves, but we're still trying to change something about the external world, the world external to consciousness, the factual world. Like, the world is this way and it needs to be this way, and to fix my emotion, I need to change the world. And again, that I want to reiterate, that applies to ourselves. So we could have a shaming emotion towards ourselves, and it's the same kind of thing. I am this way and I need to be this way. So in order to fix my emotion, I have to change myself into this thing. And this is how society is run. Everybody's got emotions and they're acting on them. And other people, and we're also trying to motivate other people by activating their emotions. And excuse me. And so it's a bunch of people believing their emotions, interacting and bouncing off each other. Do emotions get healed this way? The emotions that are wounds don't get healed this way. So the emotions that, like I said, that are just immediate reactions to the present moment and are fully felt, it sort of doesn't matter whether you believe them or not at least for the healing of the emotion. You know, in terms of awakening, you'd want to be awake for that emotion. But if you're just naturally fully feel the emotion and feel it go all the way through, then that emotion is not going to cause a wound that needs healing. But the emotions that need healing, you need to see through the beliefs of the emotion, because they're wounds, that emotions that need healing are emotions about the past, even though they look like they're emotions about the present. And so you can't heal them until you realize that. Okay, so the second way, so that's the first way. The first way is we are the emotion. We believe the beliefs of the emotion. We believe the way to fix the emotion is to change the external world. The second stage, and we can call this the sort of simple idea of mindfulness, is that we observe the emotion. We become awake to the emotion. So rather than just being the emotion, we go, wait a second, what is this emotion? Now, you may be surprised, but most of the emotions we're acting on, we are not even aware that we're having. Now, there are emotions that are painful to us and that they keep coming up and we're sort of aware they're there. I'm not saying there's no emotions that we're not conscious of, but most of the emotions that are sort of driving us around all day, we're not aware in the moment that we're having them. We're not like, oh, I'm anxious, that's why I'm doing this. We're just anxious and we're doing it. Or we're angry and we're doing it. And then there's another level where we're sort of aware we have an emotion and we're like, yeah, I'm really scared, but we're not actually fully conscious of the emotion, because the emotion is made up of, and this is a basic element of the mindfulness teaching, the emotion is made up of our sensory experience. So it's made up of feelings in the body, thoughts in the mind, sounds and pictures in the mind. Those feelings could also be categorized as desires, and those thoughts in the mind could also be categorized as beliefs. That's sort of just another level of description. But so even though you might be right, boy, I'm anxious a lot, or boy, I'm angry a lot, or boy, I'm sad a lot, or whatever it is, or boy, I'm ashamed a lot. We say boy a lot when we're really emotional. And that's good, by the way. That's great. That's actually an important stage in healing, is to be aware you're having the emotion. Of course, as I said, most people are not, most of us are not aware of what emotion it is that's driving us in every moment of our day. So that's good, but we're sort of only intellectually aware. We just have a name for it, and then we don't actually feel it. We don't actually see what's going on in the body. We don't actually see the full picture of what it's driving in our mind. So we're still more or less stuck in the first mode. That is, we are like, yes, I'm anxious, but I believe that I am anxious, that it's me. I believe the beliefs of the anxiety, and I believe the way to get rid of this anxiety is to change the world. So even though I'm aware of the anxiety itself and I can name it, it doesn't get me out of stage one. So getting into stage two is to actually become conscious of the elements that make up your emotion. So to stop in the moment and go, oh, I'm having this sensations through my body. I'm having these words running in my mind. I'm having these pictures generated. And this is actually, again, this could be the full practice. If you do this fully, it'll solve everything ultimately. But we're going to go through some more stages here to make it more clear. But this can get very, very subtle. There can be very subtle little images that float by that are having a big emotional impact in your body. There can be just the subtlest filter you're putting over the other person that you're looking at that makes them seem scary or makes them seem bad. And so it requires a lot of clarity. And as Shinzen would say, subtle is significant. You want to look really closely at this emotion. So we'll call this second state observation, observing. And again, it's a sort of one of the models of what it is to be a meditator, is this idea that you get some distance from things and you have some equanimity with it, and you watch very clearly and you observe very clearly. It's a very, very good stage and very good practice to work on. Then what does it do? What is the state of mind? Well, as you're doing this, you are separating yourself from the emotion. So in the first stage, you're identified with emotion. In the second stage, you're going, oh, I am not the emotion because I am the observer of the emotion. When you are no longer the emotion, then you no longer have to see the world through the beliefs of the emotion. And ultimately, you may also be able to realize that the healing of the emotion requires the movement of the emotion itself, not something external in the world. So you've identified that you're separate from the emotion. So we're going to go into the third stage here. Again, you could tie all these stages together all in the mindfulness, but I think it's actually pretty useful to emphasize different aspects of what it's like to be with your emotion. Because really that's what everyone tells you, right? When you're a spiritual teacher, they be with your emotion. Just be with that emotion, right? Accept your emotion. Okay, well, what does that mean? It could mean a lot of different things, because actually when we are just doing what our emotion tells us, we're being with our emotion. So there's all sorts of ways of being with emotion. So the third stage is you want to notice now that I'm going to use that word with, you are actually with your emotion. So you've separated from yourself from your emotion, but you are not separate from your emotion. You are with the emotion, as you could be with a friend, as you could be with a child. And this requires a kind of lovingness towards the emotion, a caring towards the emotion. So one way of putting this is this will not work for all emotions, I want to say, but this is what you're trying to do, is find a relationship of care with the emotion. So it might be a parental relationship, like you're the adult and the emotion is a child. And with that, we'll work with a lot of emotions, because a lot of the emotions that are causing us pain are emotions we've had from childhood. So what we're doing here is the first stage of observing is this is a little bit cold. It has a little bit of flavor of coldness because we're just observing, right? And we're being non-reactive. And we're still going to be observing and non-reactive with this third state, but it's from a state of love, of care. Now, why is this important? Well, this is important because almost all emotions that are stuck want to be heard. So if you're just observing them, that's okay. That will do some of that work in stage 2. But it's different when someone is listening to you and loves you and wants to hear what you have to say and cares about you, and someone who's just a stranger who's listening to you. Those both can be very helpful, but there's a difference when you're getting that lovingness, when there's a relationship of support. In this way, you see, in the second stage, there's a danger that you feel like you're running away from the emotion, right? You're separating yourself from the emotion because it's bad. So you're going to be over here and you're going to observe it, and it's going to stay over there because it's bad. Now, that's not the way we want, that's not the right way to do stage 2, but it's a almost inevitable side effect of doing it just that way. So at some point you want to start making sure you're adding in this love, which says, you know what? Yes, I'm not identical to the emotion, but I am separate from the emotion. I'm sorry, I'm not identical to the emotion, but I am with the emotion. The emotion isn't somewhere else. It's not off in some other universe, right? It's not in some other body. It's not in some other consciousness. It's here in your awareness. You are with the emotion. And now we can add the lovingness to that. Right? You are lovingly with the emotion. You are here to hear what the emotion has to say. Now that saying may be just physical movement, physical expression. It may be words or emotion. And by the way, at this point, you might, the second stage, I would say, is a classical way of sitting on the cushion and really being still and letting it all be there. This third stage, you might start encouraging, and this will be even more so later on, but you might start allowing for a little bit more movement in the body when you, at least times when you want to work with the emotion, allowing it to express itself, speak to you. It might be really important to name the emotion, even though you want to hold that lightly, but go, yes, I'm afraid, right? Yes, I'm expressing what it is. So a fourth way of being with our emotion may seem counter to the previous ones. And it really only works in a healthy way if you've sort of done it, if you're doing it after the first three stage, after the second and third stage. And that's to let go of the emotion. And what do I mean by that? That means to trust the emotion so much and you no longer need to control it or investigate it and attend to it. This is a fairly advanced stage. To those of you who have worked with the more direct path stuff, it's sort of like going straight to awareness. And by the way, you can skip a bunch of steps and heal a bunch of emotions by just sitting in awareness. Absolutely. But the healthiest way and the most clear way to do this is to go through stages 2 and 3 first. And then as you've created a sense of safety for the emotion and a sense of it really being seen and heard with clarity, you can say, you know what? Okay, you're there. And now I'm going to let you be there in the big space of awareness. And it's no longer the central experience. It's just part of a much, much bigger experience, but it is part. So you're letting go of holding on to it. You're letting go of it, keeping it central. You're almost saying, oh, this emotion is a waterfall. And I've been looking at it because it's so beautiful and I love it so much. But now I'm going to look up at the sky above the waterfall and the jungle around the waterfall. And, you're going to take in everything, and it's a way of releasing and giving even more space to the emotion. So let's put it this way. Sometimes when we love and care for a child, for instance, we might make the mistake of feeling like we need to fix the child. And we might make the mistake of saying our love is going to fix the child. We might make the mistake of feeling like I need to be with this child all the time to make sure it gets healed and that it knows it's cared for. And there's some truth to sort of all of that, but there's some dangers in it as well. At a certain point, you need to let the healing happen on its own. Now, the healing won't happen if you keep rewounding it. So it requires that you've become awake to the structure of the healing, of the thing that needs to be healed. But then there's a point where you need to stop picking at it. And so it's sort of like letting the emotion sit in the spaciousness of awareness, sit and move and flow however it wants, without you needing to clock every little element of it with like almost an intellectual awareness. You need to let go of that and let the emotion flow in spaciousness. Does that make sense? Good. You know, it's sort of like your friend comes over and their relationship's ending and they're super upset and they talk to you for 3 hours and you're there with them and you're listening, and then you let them go to their room and they cry, you know, let them go cry for a few hours, right? You don't need to be there. You need to allow that. You need to allow that process to unwind without interference. But they know that you're there, right? They know you're there when they need to come out. They know you're not rejecting them. They know you're not running away from it, right? This is why this stage really is most powerful after stage 2 and 3, because we can use transcendence, going to awareness, as a way of running away from our life. And then that will rewound certain parts of ourselves. Even though it may make a lot of other things easier in our life, it can rewound some parts. So you need to establish to the parts of you, hey, I am here with you, even as I am in awareness. Okay, and the 5th stage here, and this really maps onto many of the classical, you go out to enlightenment and transcendence and you come back to being normal, right? The 5th stage is returning to, and often real wounds require this stage. This stage is a natural outcome of this practice, but some wounds will actually not fully heal until this thing happens. And the 5th stage is being the emotion again. Again, this can sort of happen in any of the other stages. If you're doing it a certain way, it can happen automatically, but we're just teasing these apart so we can notice, oh yeah, maybe I'm not letting this thing happen. So the 5th stage is you're now being the emotion. You can see the world from the perspective of the emotion. You don't feel separate at all from the emotion. But you're awake to all of this at this point. There's no longer any resistance to having this emotion. And the emotions that aren't healed are emotions that you are not willing to fully feel. That's just the whole story. Emotions that aren't healed are emotions that you are not willing to fully feel. Now, don't blame yourself. That lack of willingness, that resistance is another set of emotions, is another set of responses. But the emotions that will not heal are the ones you are not willing or capable, let's say, to feel fully. So in this 5th stage, you are re-entering, and it requires a kind of bravery. You are re-entering the emotion to go into its illusion again. but intentionally awake. And when you do this wholeheartedly, it can last only a second, because you'll see through it so quickly. But sometimes it takes longer, you have to work at it. So you have this fear, and you've given it a lot of space to move, and you've really observed how it's made up of certain thoughts and certain pictures and certain feelings in the body. And you've given it love and safety. So you feel even more of it. That love and safety allows it to come and flow even more so. By the way, this process can lead to the intensification of the feeling of the emotion, because you're now allowing the full emotion to be felt more and more. You've then given it space to just move as it wants, letting it know that it's allowed to do whatever it needs to do, but you're fine and your life is good because you're in awareness. And then on the last stage, you come back in and say, okay, let's feel it all. Let's feel the full experience of this fear. What am I so terrified of? What is it like to be this terrified? What does my body want to do? What emotions want to flow? What actions want to go through my body as I fully feel this emotion? And you can work with that in two ways. You can actually move the body, and I think that can be very helpful, especially for overwhelming emotion. Or you can sit perfectly still and let that energy of movement happen without yourself moving. That would be a lot of energy moving through the body. It requires a lot of deep relaxation to be able to do it that way, though. And I really invite you, especially if you've been meditating for a while, to check in. Am I doing this fifth step ever? Because the training is such, especially in mindfulness, to separate us from the emotion, right? And it's not the training. Ultimately, if you listen to the words, it's accept this emotion fully. So it's not actually asking you to separate yourself from it. It's not asking you to distance yourself from it. But that just is it's just one of the misunderstandings that can happen. And in fact, it's not even a misunderstanding, because there is this, as I said, this useful stage of getting yourself some space to be able to look at the thing. You have to break the addiction of the beliefs to be able to go back and have the beliefs in a non-addicted way. And then it's a kind of invigorating sense of bravery that's sort of coming out of awareness. Is, yeah, I'm willing to go back to into any illusion to heal it. Okay, finally, I just want to add a word about trauma here. So with trauma, we just have to be particularly careful how we're working with it, because a little wrong step leads to big consequences with trauma. And so it's just really important that we emphasize the safety, the love, we have to create a real sense of safety to feel our trauma. So that has to be established. That has to be established before you go into it, and then it has to be reestablished after you come out of it. And it will probably not happen all in one session, like some other emotions might. So especially with this last stage, which is important and necessary for healing trauma, you really do want to make sure that you are in a safe space and you feel like you have a safe out if you go in and you start to get lost. And ultimately, this maps onto the path of awakening or enlightenment. You are coming back to being a full human being, you are not separate from being a normal, full human being with normal emotions and normal desires and all that stuff. But you're wholly accepting of being that, which requires a wakefulness. You're sort of awake to the aliveness. And what happens is you purify and clean your system out over time by doing this. And now new things don't get hooked in, because now you feel them fully from the beginning. Because you've already accepted that it's good to be a full human being, right? Fantastic.